Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining our webinar, Multigenerational Observability and Security for Evolving Cloud Operations. My name is Veronica Henley, and I'm the Marketing Director at CloudHesive. I'm happy to be here with two great speakers. First, we have Todd Williams, Senior Partner Manager at Datadog. Todd brings nearly a decade of experience in sales partner management with the tech industry. Before joining Datadog, he held leadership roles at Obrservability Software, where he specialized in APM and observability, and Terminus, where he managed strategic alliances. We are also joined here by Patrick Hanna, CloudHesive CTO and co-founder. Patrick leads our technology operation, product management, and product development. Before founding CloudHesive, Patrick held senior roles at global organizations like Pegasystems, where he expanded the cloud platform for enterprise customers in regulated industries. And Arise Virtual Solutions, where he designed and managed a contact center platform that supported significant national and international growth. And now I'll hand it over to Patrick.
All right, so what are we going to talk about today? Well, it's easier to build on AWS than it was 5 or 10 years ago, which is awesome. There's a multitude of reference architectures, quick starts, guidance from the community, events like these, right? So for organizations that got that early start, what's a common set of challenges we run across? Well, staying current in your architecture, operations, and security. There's a multitude of different ways that you could deploy your workloads, of course, platforms by which you operate them, like Datadog, and of course, how you go about securing them. Finally, how do we create this balance, right? As builders, we're focused on development of new feature functionality, right? That's what our constituents want. They want those new capabilities. And while they don't tell us, they obviously expect us to do the right thing and address risk and debt as it comes up, right? An application where you can't trust the data, where there is risk at loss of that data or exfiltration of that data isn't really an application that we want to use as users. So let's dig into some of these things.
Yeah. And great point, Patrick. Part of it is as to why it remains a challenge to stay current is people continue to move to the cloud at a increasingly higher and higher clip. And according to Gartner, 75% of organizations will anchor their digital transformation in the cloud by 2026. And that's certainly something we've seen at Datadog. The rise of customers across the board and adopting cloud native technologies to improve uptime, resource utilization, and quicken their time to market as well. And so as a validation of that point, so in terms of like the increased growth of organizations and the number of organizations moving to the cloud, you also see the correlation here from a spend perspective as well. There's a sustained rate of migration over the past few years. We only see that it's going to continue to grow at an increasing rate, especially as AI comes into it. And Gartner notes that public cloud spend will exceed $1 trillion by 2027, and that's only going to be 18% of the global tech spend. So there's a lot of money being invested, and it's really important to continue to think about why that's being invested, especially as companies like CloudHesive and Datadog look to help our customers. But it's really about helping customers when they look to interact with their customers online, differentiate from their competition through innovation, run into the cloud and get agility so you can get a short time to value and gain efficiencies. There's a lot of different things and a lot of different reasons as to why organizations are moving to the cloud. And ultimately, modernization leads to better business outcomes. So all this was true over the past 10 years, and we expect it to, again, continue at a high rate. And, Patrick, obviously there's a lot of growth, but that doesn't come without challenges, right?
Exactly. Oops. Click too fast there. Thank you, Todd. As we see this growth, we see really an explosion of complexity as well. In the top left-hand corner, we're really looking at the diversity of technologies that are in use to build and operate those workloads. The way software was distributed used to literally be shrink wrapped, right? Purchased a retail. And so as the platforms by which technology can be provided, right, the evolution to client server based services really opened up the breadth of capabilities in building and operating those workloads. Enter the world of SaaS. Right. With that, we have this enabler, right? Our frequency of release that literally went to because of the logistics in producing a piece of shrink-wrapped software from once a year or less to literally on demand. This also is further supported by the scale by which we operate. Right. We're no longer constrained to having to estimate our compute needs. Procure and build to that. We have access to on-demand, geographically distributed, pay-per-use services, and multitudes of ways in which those services can be consumed, right? Containerized, serverless, or traditional VM-based approaches. We also went from a very siloed approach to developers develop, operations people deploy and operate, to this concept of DevOps. And now the business plays a role, right? And security plays a role. So complexity, which may initially sound like something that is not a good thing, is actually a good thing because we're enabled here. We're enabled to really address the demands of our users on a much more faster pace than once a year. And we're able to collaborate and through collaboration experiment much more rapidly. So where could you be, or where are you at on your journey? When I look at how a lot of builders start, it's typically a small team that's focused on building an app to test a hypothesis, right? And by testing that hypothesis, if you're partially successful in it, you've got some customers, and now you're able to further expand your hypothesis, right? What will attract customers to your particular product? Now that you have customers, those customers are going to have some unstated but expected expectations. That's why we call them expectations. And you may soon learn that customers are not the only ones paying for your service. You're going to have employees, you're going to have investors, boards of directors. They all want to know how you're doing. They all need data, right? And so with that, right, when we look at how CloudHesive uses Datadog to help empower our customers who are also builders, we have this multi-pronged point of view, right? Datadog has a variety of products that allow us to ingest, query, correlate, and create alerts on log data, infrastructure, whether it's a hybrid type workload that's on premises and cloud, whether it's something that's been migrated from the cloud, rather on premises to the cloud, or containerized or serverless-based workloads, right? We have the ability to understand that infrastructure and what's going on them. Further, we have the ability to understand what's going on in the application, so we can help our customers make decisions on where to address pain points, rather than the traditional approach as we saw in the previous slide of that's more of a development problem than an operations problem. Further, when we look at the full life cycle of this application, right, it's probably web-based, it's client server. And you know what? Without networking, there's no users using it. So having a point of view and understanding both from, what is the customer's experience look like through synthetics and RUM, and then also understand where may bottlenecks exist around the network. And finally, am I operating both securely configured infrastructure? And what are my risks in how I operate my workload? Network performance monitoring and cloud security management come into play.
Yeah, exactly, Patrick. And so why do we work better together? Thinking about the pieces that Patrick just went through, and especially thinking about what he mentioned of there's going to be customers, there's going to be investors, boards of directors, there's going to be a lot of business folks involved. Really what it comes down to and why CloudHesive and Datadog work together is because we have common customer values value drivers that we're looking to achieve for our customers. A lot of times customers will come to Datadog with very pointed statements around, hey, we need a better logging solution, or we need better code level visibility into our application performance, or something like our legacy monitoring solutions can't keep up with our journey to the cloud. And so all of those are very important and relevant points to unpack with a customer, but ultimately our go-to-market teams spend add a lot of detail and spend a lot of time really understanding what are the business drivers to that, and ultimately how are we helping customers accelerate their digital transformation? Are we able to help them enable operational scalability and cost reduction? Are we enhancing their customer experience? And are we reducing any security and compliance risk? So that's really what we strive for at Datadog, and CloudHesive does as well. And a lot of times, people will come to Datadog with those kind of point problems, but there are strategic partners like CloudHesive that have already been working on the more strategic, business-focused value drivers that our customers are looking for. So it makes it for a very powerful partnership. And so from our end, it's really helping from the Datadog end, it's helping drive the technology. And so we do that from providing a single platform for all security and observability needs. And what that boils down to, you'll see here, is really the entirety of the Datadog platform. So it's a single unified platform powered by shared services and our AI and machine learning. So anything from infrastructure to applications, digital experience, so how your customers are interacting with it and your end users are interacting with your applications, your logs, having all of that, the kind of core 3 pillars of observability into one place as well. And then layering in the security, cloud services management, software delivery. So it's a really comprehensive platform, and it's designed to be the end-to-end solution for our customers. But part of the theme of today is the multi-generational aspect of things. And so the way that Datadog is also built is to be to allow our customers to use what they need when they need it. So you don't necessarily have to use, and if you buy Datadog, you don't have to use every single piece that's on here. We really meet our customers where they are in their journey through observability, and allow them to use a platform as they see fit. So a lot of times starting with infrastructure and then all evolving and adding in applications and logs. The latest generation that we're seeing is the need for security to shift left and allow for the DevOps team to have more visibility into the security aspect of the business so that they can take action on it more quickly. So that's kind of the next generation that we're working towards, and the problem that we're helping our customers solve, and getting that more real-time visibility. So there's a lot within the platform, and it's really relying on partners like CloudHesive to really help unlock the full potential of Datadog.
All right. My mouse is extra sensitive today. So when we look at Datadog and how we help our customers make sense of their data, we really look at it from a decision-making perspective, right? So really the first part here of the customer cloud migration journey is the migration piece. So one of the really exciting things we use Datadog for is actually pre-migration activities. So understanding where may there be either opportunities for performance optimization or performance tuning ahead of the migration. In other words, are we migrating to appropriately sized infrastructure if this is a typical compute-based service? And then really proving, right, we want to migrate for a reason, right? So maybe it's an enterprise initiative. Organizations will typically look at cost as a potential driver from a long-term investment. But we really like to see where can there be performance gains, right? So really leveraging Datadog pre-migration and post-migration, we not only know or have a higher level of confidence that we're using the appropriately configured resources, we're also able to prove or disprove, right, any performance gains, which we would absolutely anticipate. From there, right, most migrations typically, the majority of the workloads will be lift and shift. However, having a strong point of view around, where can we potentially modernize in the future, having insights, via Datadog, not just in the infrastructure utilization, but the intricacies of what the application is doing, can help us make recommendations and have a higher level of success in implementing modernization plays. And finally, a key part of how we use Datadog is really to operate our customers' workloads. That's anywhere from day-to-day operational needs, security operations, as well as monitoring and management the state and status of deployments, root cause analysis, and managing of customer-sourced defects. So together, we solve these challenges with Datadog, of course, providing the tools and CloudHesive providing the capabilities. So one of the things that I think is especially exciting about sharing from the perspective of CloudHesive, partner of Datadog's, is looking at some real-world workloads. And so CloudHesive, while we provide consulting and managed services to our customers, we also run our own SaaS platforms as well. And so I've used a few examples from our SaaS platform as well as some customers' environments to help put some context into, why do we care about these things? And so with that said, we'll start out with the basics, right? Most, environments, workloads start out with a typical high-level drawing such as this one, right? And this would definitely follow the typical serverless architecture pattern. Over the years, we've introduced and de-introduced compute-based resources, really finding that they can't necessarily keep up with our requirements from an operations perspective. So what's cool about this is here's the drawn-out version, and then of course, we take it to code and deploy it. And Datadog effectively can map it out for us, right? So we understand how all of those queues, Lambda functions, API gateway endpoints, GraphQL endpoints, Dynamo, all interrelate to one another, right? And then that helps us, really understand where do we have potential hotspots, right? So one of the other, kind of sets of observations we've made really in the past few years and working with our customers, technology is really going through a transformation really enabled by cloud, right? So where we saw, virtualization, begin almost 2 decades ago, very quickly picked up by hyperscalers, offering both virtualized services, EC2, and managed services as well, such as SNS, SQS, or SES, into really the development of containerized workloads. So really, when I look at architectures, we really fall into those 3 categories of compute-based, container-based, and serverless. And behind serverless, when you look at it, right, there's quite a broad set of technologies available to us. Something like over 180 services on AWS, with a significant portion of them, basically falling into the serverless category, right? Being accessible on demand without pre-deployment, integrated into AWS's control planes, their APIs, and so forth. We're also seeing really a change in how we think about monitoring, right? Observability has really picked up both in concept and term, a lot of traction in the past few years. And, one of the key, areas here, what we're calling multi-generational observability is really the ability to generate those insights into broadly integrated sets of technologies, right? So where pure play observability might typically play well with your microservices-based applications that have been instrumented specifically for that. We don't necessarily run into that with our customers. We run into, again, a very broad set of technologies with those customers. Some may be pre-cloud, some might be working their way towards a fully serverless microservices or a containerized microservices-based application. But many are really right in that middle spot, right? So that's where we find this value in Datadog, and that we have the ability to understand what's going on at every layer and not necessarily be fully reliant on what the application traces tell us. We'll talk a little bit about AWS's well-architected framework, but as we go through assessments with our customers using the framework, some of the common challenges we run into, monitoring, right? Customers not having a strong operational or security monitoring baseline. If they do, how they respond to it. So, do they have 24/7 coverage to responding to those events? And of course, being able to do strong root cause analysis, having access to that operational or security data to be able to determine why did this occur. Some of the other areas that were really eye-openers for me as we went through multitudes of well-architected reviews with our customers, data validation, right? So an error is not always reflected as an error, right? Sometimes it's invalid data. And another is really defining your operational parameters. How responsive do I need my application to be? How available do I need it to be? We're not always turning that knob up to max. And finally, really hot topic, right? A common theme, right, and social media is release on a Friday, right? So really having the confidence to release is really supported by these 4 key areas: test automation, release automation, post-release monitoring, and rollback capabilities. Many organizations have heavily invested in the release automation piece, right? DevOps or before that SDLC, which typically is going to support rollback capabilities. Where we still do, however, see gaps is both in test automation and post-release monitoring. So how do I know that I'm going to go into this release with a pretty high level of success? And if we miss something, how do we know? So more so, as an application owner, right, as a builder, what's expected of me? Surprisingly, a lot, right? So, from a product and development perspective, are we being responsive to the needs of our customers, right? Are we accurate in our prediction of availability of features? And are we properly allocating our resources to developing those features? From a security and compliance perspective, it's not just our code, it's the code in the libraries we use, how we configure our infrastructure, what risks we have around intellectual property, particularly using like GPL type code, and then a whole other multitude of things that may not necessarily be technical, right? Vendor management, license, other SaaS products in play, software, non-functional systems like my DevOps platforms, the backgrounds of our people doing the development and operational support, training, and then phishing simulation, right? So all these things, right, really collectively build up our security and compliance capabilities as an app owner. And then, of course, we have our infrastructure, right? Is it available? And then how does it perform from a synchronous or asynchronous perspective? A lot of these questions we can actually answer in Datadog. And then finally, right, we look at just how's our customer health, and how is our budget to plan, right? How's our margin? Is it costing us more to operate the platform than it is gaining us in revenue? So there's a lot of different ways to measure this, right? So we maybe run multiple applications. So we look at it from the portfolio perspective. Maybe we cohort to specific customers or types of customers, geographies or teams or lines of businesses. And then we also want to have a strong sense of how are we measuring the costs incurred in operating our platform. So vendor management. So there's actions that come out of this, right? So we want to prove to the customers they're getting the value that we believe they're getting from our product, determine when there's a churn risk, and also determine where do we need to keep improving in how we operate our workloads. So here's some really cool examples. Our platform basically, one of the things it does is provide omni-channel capabilities, so things like email to our customers. And we like to understand what's the uptake of our customer usage of those features look like. And so it's really cool that all those features are basically exposed via API calls, and we can actually graph out that usage down to the customer, down to the region, straight in Datadog. And that lets us make some decisions around where do we want to invest in building features. One of the other cool things, so within the omni-channel capabilities, we do things like language translation, suggested responses. So we're further able to not just understand where our customers are using those features, but also the subsets of those features, which customers are taking advantage of omni-channel and translation, or omni-channel and suggested responses. We also can understand at a high level, what is our customer's experience, right? This is your typical, static front end, API-driven back-end serverless application on AWS, right? So here we understand, which version of the front end are customers using, how many sessions, which parts of the application are users going to, and then how long is it taking to really load the page, right? And we could drill down into specific environments if we want to do pre-release validation, or even specific services or cohorts of users based on their email, customer, or region they're coming from. So common challenges, right? Information security is starting to be a little bit of a theme here, but also, really looking at, how are we handling or building data into our application, right? The graphic Todd presented earlier with all of the different feature sets of Datadog had a section dedicated just to AI, right? We have on our roadmap a section dedicated just to AI. So we've absolutely seen, within the last 2 years, renewed focus in AI and ML capabilities, particularly generative AI. And we're also now seeing, the potential to actually create support for not just people users, but machine users and workloads as well. So machine to machine, API-driven communications. So the change in platforming, right? Compute has effectively been commoditized, right? Containerization, we saw, 10 years ago start to pick up traction and really mature. Is EKS or ECS became the standard on AWS. And then as a way forward, really where we encourage a lot of customers to look, but not necessarily without balancing feature development is serverless. Again, there's a number of benefits there. And finally, what we're seeing both in how workloads are operated and the workloads themselves is what we're calling stackholidation. So really the consolidation of stacks, right? So, where I would say 20 years ago, you were rather limited in terms of operational and security operations type functions, right? You had something that monitored metrics, you had something that ingested logs, it was maybe called a SIM, to really what really became the Wild West 10 years ago, where you had very purpose-built on-premises and SaaS-based platforms. We're now really seeing a consolidation of those products, like we're looking at with Datadog here today. So the other key thing here is how we leverage the well-architected framework to understand our customers' workloads. And it's really divided into 6 pillars. What you would typically expect, or your users would expect, right? Is it reliable, right? Is it performant? Is it available? Is it secure, right? And then you, right, as an operator, is it cost optimized, right? Am I thinking about sustainability? And so the cool thing about this is while the pillars form a number of questions that you ask of your workload, there's also specialized guidance called lenses. And so the SaaS lens is particularly exciting because it has, I've learned some things in terms of how I could efficiently build serverless SaaS applications without necessarily having to write a ton of code. Information security is probably our final big topic here. And so what we found is many organizations have built from the ground up their workloads, and eventually their customers start asking about things, especially if it's a B2B platform with maybe an industry specialization, right? So typically SOC 1 or 2, type 1 or 2, PCI DSS, and then of course more specialized in public sector could be FedRAMP or now CMMC. CMMC, which in particular is picking up a lot of traction in the US, HIPAA and HITRUST if you're in the healthcare information space. Ultimately, at the end of the day, though, when we think about information security, we break it down into processes, right? So what information is present? What are the risks to exposure or manipulation of that information? What policies do I have as an organization, and procedures do I have as an organization explaining the protection of that information, the technical controls that support those policies and procedures, and then am I doing some form of an assessment or audit or testing against those policies, procedures, and controls in protecting our information from said risks? At the end of the day, though, it comes down to people. So what are we doing for onboarding and offboarding of our employees and contractors, the permissions they have and are given, the credentials they use with those permissions, and what are we doing to ensure that they're capable and securely operating and developing the application from a training, background check, phishing perspective, and then use of preferred or vetted vendors, softwares, and services. There's a lot that could be missed in the security area. This is just a typical set of things we have found with compute-based workloads, typically, serving traditional enterprise needs on the cloud. There's a lot here. So one of the cool things about Datadog is the SIM module. This is a screenshot we grabbed out of SIM for one of our workloads. This is non-production. And as we see, we have a mix here of sources, right? So one of the things we have to prove from a compliance perspective is that changes to code are done through a set of controls, right? So we actually have a monitor here that we've built that tells us when that code has been changed outside of those controls. Introduction of new code through our software repository, GitHub, understanding when configuration changes are being made there that could potentially open us up for risk. And of course, also understanding where we may have risk with our IAM users and roles. So really all common things that many organizations struggle with when operating a workload. Right, so how am I securing my users? How am I securing my code? And probably another great example I don't have here is really how am I securely configuring my cloud environment, right? So S3 bucket configurations in particular. So another key piece here that we talked about is revenue to usage to cost attribution, right? So with us, our serverless workloads, we're typically going to scale linearly, right? As people use it, it's going to invoke a Lambda, and we'll pay for that Lambda. So we have opportunity to optimize at scale with either changes to code or changes to architecture, or leveraging things like savings plans. There's a number of different ways, of course, in addition to that, that could be leveraged, especially for compute-based. So right sizing of resources. Using Datadog, we can understand where we may have resources that have too much CPU, too much memory, or the other way around, maybe bottlenecked, or just simply unused. We could use that data from Datadog to make decisions around right sizing or removal of those resources. We could also simulate the movement of inappropriate resource types. So say running a database on EC2 where RDS could be much more suited, or moving your ECS, EKS, or containerized based workloads to semi-serverless, serverless like services, rather like Fargate. Even understanding, where some of our costs are going to from a like egress data transfer perspective, right? So all of those are exposed in metrics and Datadog, so we can make decisions around how we want to optimize our costs. And a really kind of great example here that isn't as glaring as you would expect, but we made an enhancement to our application late June where we leveraged provisioned Lambda functions, provision capacity on our Lambda functions. And it absolutely had an improvement in performance. However, the cost to do that was underestimated. So, leveraging Datadog, we were able to see, especially here, pretty significant difference in our kind of daily volume spikes. Towards the end here, we see a reduction of it. This is when we backed out that change. So in this case, this is something that made a lot of sense from a performance perspective, however, impacted how we looked at margin for operating the workload in the application. And going back to really understanding the operational parameters, while there was an improvement in performance, it wasn't significant enough that it warranted the investment. So we used the data coming out of Datadog to make a decision to back that out. That really ties into sustainability, right? So while AWS has goals around sustainability, which is very important for pretty much any hyperscaler, we have goals too, and ours are unique in that we can influence and impact our customers by being leaders in this space, right? We get a cross-section of customers and understand how different workloads may be influenced around sustainability. And then we can make direct impact ourselves in how we operate our workloads. So it really goes back to defining those operational parameters and making quality choices in service selection, right? So having an always-on fixed EC2 instance versus something that scales up or scales down when it's not needed during off hours can have a big impact. Collectively, we put all this together and we look at the workload from a lifecycle management perspective. And so, a typical workload is going to have an architecture, some combination of services to run it. And we know that workload is going to need monitored for abnormal conditions, which is going to vary depending on the architecture and the workload. And sometimes recovering from those conditions can be addressed through automation. Sometimes there's human processes in the mix. And sometimes that workload requires integrated systems or architectures right outside of the cloud footprint. And so we'll really focus here on monitoring and the impact there, but it goes back to starting with, are these VM-based, container-based, or serverless, right? Each behaves differently from a lifecycle management perspective. And each has its own needs, right? In particular, when we think about virtual machines, containers to a degree, somewhat more heavy in the patching perspective versus functions or services where you have your runtime. It's typically managed by AWS and then your code, right? So your focus could really go into what is the strength of the code that I'm producing or the libraries that code is reliant on. So how does multi-generational observability via Datadog play a role here? Ease of implementation, Datadog being a cloud service, it's quite easy to get started. And mass support for integrations, right? So all of the serverless services we use have some dashboard or set of monitors or metrics we could take advantage of. Consideration for hyperscaling, this is especially important when we look at auto-scaling capabilities. A common interface, so whether I'm looking at network, security, infrastructure logs, it's got the same look and feel, which you may have seen through some of these screenshots. Of course, to me, one of the most important is this is decoupled from our data in control plane and from the cloud provider's data in control plane. So if the cloud provider were to experience degradation in availability or performance, or our app experience a degradation in availability or performance, there's a lower likelihood that Datadog is going to be affected because it's decoupled from those. So some of the areas that we're using Datadog to run and manage our workloads and our customers' workloads, having dashboards like these help us directly interrogate the performance of services. So here we have something that's currently under QA. And we could understand that based on the type of QA test being run around this time, we had an increase in errors. So we'd correlate that to the test we're running and then determine is that test covering all of the scenarios? So is this a silent failure, or is this a failure that's actually exposed to the test itself? We're also able to understand, especially for serverless microservices-based platforms, ours in particular, across all the regions that we're deployed in. There's 304 functions to be aware of. We could understand at a glance, right, which ones are under performance constraints, right? Either errors, over invocations, runtime costs, runtime durations, cold starts, memory conditions, timeouts, or even over a lot allocated concurrencies, which was the issue that we ran into a few slides ago. So this is really fun. As we were putting together this presentation, we actually had a release. And I grabbed some screenshots straight out of Datadog with how we could use the application logs, the APM traces, and even this cool feature called error tracking to look in changes in patterns of errors, pre-release and post-release. This helped us actually detect escaped defects before customers reported them, correct those without necessarily needing the exact steps to reproduce. We worked backwards from the error, release, and then validate that the change addressed the issue, right? So we see, basically from the 6th to the 9th, brand new error popped up and was effectively eliminated here. For longer running things, so these two really go hand in hand, we see that there was a change in configuration in a customer environment the end of last month, and then that introduced a defect that had been previously unsurfaced. Actually, in this case, it had been surfaced and then unsurfaced and surfaced again. And then we were able to validate, basically pre-release to the customer the decrease in the events, right? Effectively proving the fix was viable. More so, we could also see with that same issue where there's an increase in errors. So through the watchdog capabilities. So watchdog is going to surface things that we're maybe not looking for based on past patterns of usage. And then error tracking is going to do similar, but allow us to understand the rate of errors, right? Which could help us measure the impact to users. Finally, everything we saw in the past few slides, we could turn into alerts, right? So some of these are pre-canned because Datadog detected it was a serverless application. And then some of these were specific things we were trying to track, right? Are we exhausting AWS quotas? Do you have a particularly problematic Lambda function that we're trying to keep an eye on? And then, overall tracking of Lambda concurrent executions. So the other workload I want to look at here, a little more complicated in terms of the resources it's using. Not necessarily microservices based, but actually uses a combination of fixed EC2, auto-scaled EC2, Kubernetes, EKS, and extensive networking. So Datadog is able to map out those primary services, but the really cool thing is it's actually looking at all the network traffic. So we could understand that dependency flow and where we may have failures or bottlenecks, both within the cloud infrastructure, APIs to the cloud control plane, and then external to the cloud infrastructure as well. It does this both by looking at the network traffic and the DNS queries. And more so because this is a hybrid workload that has virtual network appliances running into AWS, we also have visibility to the state and status of all of those and the interfaces and the tunnels behind them. So when there is a reported application issue, we could very quickly determine where is the failure potentially existing, in which of the 7 layers of the stack that is involved in the operation of that workload. Final example here is really the benefits of moving from fixed EC2 to auto-scaled ECS, EKS, or Fargate-based containerized workloads. Ultimately, what it comes down to is what's responsible in caring and feeding for this workload from a patching and backup and just general reboots if the service fails perspective. So all that has a cost to it, right? And we're able to take that cost and really reinvest it when it comes to monitoring, right? So monitoring can help us address those types of workloads, defects through event automation, but it also, that type of workload introduces complexity, which Datadog helps to address through the broad set of logs and metrics that may be generated outside of AWS. We could collect and correlate all that together. And then, of course, we could push this into automation, but more so a move to serverless, we could actually shift all of that stuff into just the AWS integration and have the same visibility and more opportunities available to automatically address or recover from those conditions. So we covered a lot of ground. Really, AWS and Datadog are continuing to increase the breadth and depth of their service offerings. And lesson I really learned 10 years ago is it's key to keep up with that. We've run into customers that have deployed to both AWS and Datadog, and they've taken it so far, but didn't really keep up. So we love to help our customers with that. Typically, there's things we wish for, and they magically show up either in Datadog or AWS. As I mentioned at the beginning, it's easier to get started than it was yesterday, literally. Either it's cheaper, the support ecosystem is stronger, or services have been simplified. Datadog, as an example, has started to really look at management of fleets. Something that we otherwise maybe 10 years ago wrote scripts for. Build with these things in mind, right? Evolving workloads, well architected, and observability. So really consider sustainability when you're choosing an approach. Don't forget about enablement of your team, and you're only really limited by your imagination and ability to execute.
So, do we have any questions? And remember to use the Q&A box below on your screen. We have one question, and the question says, can you provide an example where Datadog has provided insights when performing root causes analysis?
Yeah, I'll take that one. So yeah, this is, I think, one of the really cool things about Datadog, right? So when we look at root cause analysis, we really are looking at it in the immediacy, right? So a service is impacted, a service is down, there's a security event, or trying to really piece together the parts and pieces that got us there. So recently, there's actually an event surfaced to us where a IAM user had an access key, secret key that was actually persisted locally to their device. And their device, not managed by us, had gotten a piece of malware on it that actually exposed that access key, secret key to bad actors. Those bad actors then proceeded to generate spam through the AWS SES service. And so, we were actually alerted to that through Datadog, and we were able to very quickly put together the timeline of what happened and convey that to our customer, address both the issue at hand, but also address the things that led up to it, right? How was that IAM user originally created, what's being done to protect their device, and so forth.
Great. Okay, we have another question. It says, any first-hand experiences where Datadog have provided value in proactive identification of an issue?
Yeah, so one of the things that we do after every release of software or with our customers, an infrastructure change is we'll rely on Datadog to surface up challenges or defects. And there's been cases where very much after a release, we've seen new event, right, either through the watchdog or through error tracking, and it's been faster than our ability to actually run through our test automation. So at the same time we're running our test automation, we're able to get real-time insight into the quality of our release and then quickly make a decision around rollback or hotfix.
Okay, awesome. And then we have another question. It says, how do you recommend an organization decreases its time to value when implementing Datadog?
Todd, can I throw you a curveball?
Yeah, bring it on.
All right. What do you think?
I would say use CloudHesive. Or use a partner like CloudHesive. I mean, to a lot of the points that that you've made throughout today, obviously you guys have a wide-ranging expertise when it comes to cloud and security, and Datadog is just a piece of that, right? So it's having folks like CloudHesive that have not only the expertise from the overall strategy perspective around a digital transformation, but then also the experience and expertise around Datadog. So not only do you know the tool itself, you've also, we have partners like CloudHesive that have used the tool in practice and have that wealth of knowledge to help our customers overcome any common challenges that we see. So certainly a partner like CloudHesive can help with that.
Awesome. And here is another question. It says, how does CloudHesive continue, how does CloudHesive continue to evolve its use of Datadog in support of its managed customers?
Yeah, so when we started with Datadog almost 10 years ago, we really liked its strength in monitoring. Which is what it did at the time. Again, going back to that amazing slide Todd showed earlier, Datadog does a whole lot more than that. And so we have kept up with that, at the same time keeping up with the evolution of workloads as well. And more recently, we've actually seen an opportunity to start consolidating ourselves, right? So where we maybe used one product for this a few years ago and another product for that a few years ago, really, combining that all into Datadog has given us this advantage to one, ease of setup, which is really decreases, right, the time to value when we're implementing Datadog for a new customer, because we could very quickly turn on, 5 modules versus, have to use a different tool, platform, agent for each one of those. And then, really having that cross section of customers. So, the one customer I showed, kind of typical Java, stack, right? We've worked with a number of customers like that, so we understand some of the nuances with JDKs and instrumentation and things like that. Ultimately, it really comes down to, I think, the same way, you might approach, cloud adoption as well, right? So, or building a product is you really want to start with MVP, and because it's cloud, you want to feel confident in your decisions, but you don't necessarily have to over-engineer them the way you may have traditionally needed to do on premises.
Okay. And let's see, there's another question here. It says, how does CloudHesive create value for its customers in using Datadog in support of its managed customers?
Yeah, so I think, really, one, taking away the distraction of the operations and compliance needs of a customer's workload, using that data to help us make proactive recommendations and provide guidance to the customer. But number 2, really, and this is a trend we've really seen evolve over at least the past 5 years, is we're able to enable our customers to much more quickly make decisions and troubleshoot, say, application performance issues, with Datadog while still providing value and not necessarily locking our customers out.
Awesome. Any other questions? Any other questions? 1, 2, 3. I think this is it for the questions for today. No more open questions. Great. So, so if you want to get started with Datadog and CloudHesive, you can set up a call with us. You can scan the QR code to set up a follow-up call with CloudHesive, or you can sign up for a demo. If you download the Datadog QR and sign up for our partner free trial. So thank you everybody for attending our webinar, Multi-Generational Observability and Security for Evolving Cloud. And we'll let you know if we have more webinars, and we'll keep on going and sending you more information on our services and products. Thank you very, very much.